Welcome to the createYES Summit for your environmental sustainability, where sustainability is about more than just climate change, but also about what you can do in your own life to create change in the world around you. My name is Victoria Bard, founder of createYES, and my guests today are Logan and Layla Binney. Hello.
Hello. How are you?
Today, we're going to be talking more about grounded things. We've talked so far in the summit about spirituality and how your thoughts can affect things. Now we're going to bring it to the ground. Layla has been gardening since she was a child with her grandmother and passing on that tradition, working with her grandmother. She's known as the garden lady in her community. And many visitors come and admire the fruits of her labors. And now she's passing that on to her son, Logan, who has been enjoying gardening with his mom since he was a little boy. They're in New Brunswick, Canada. And he's also a man of many trades, which includes his gardens, as well as owning and operating a welding business. And he creates metal art, which I think is really cool. My dad has lots of metal in the backyard, and I think, Dad, you could do something with that. No, he's done. Yeah, he does things with the metal, but I'm like, make some metal art. So, and there's nothing that either of them enjoy more than helping and teaching others. And let's grow with them tonight.
Right on. Thank you for inviting us to speak on your summit. This is an awesome opportunity. We're really looking forward to this, and we want to thank you.
Well, we're going to have some fun.
Okay,
Let's have some fun.
Perfect.
So first of all, you guys are developing a new program, just as I'm developing a new program to reach people. And I want to bring a variety of different ways for people to work on themselves from the inner place. Your way of doing that is by teaching people how to plant in their own small space. So talk a little bit more about that, the overarching idea of what you're here for.
Oh, go right ahead.
Well, we have quite a bit of ground to grow in, but you don't necessarily have to have a lot of space. You can grow on a deck, a balcony, window boxes, a rooftop if you're in a city. It's surprising how much food you can grow in a really small area.
Yeah, when you take advantage of growing vertically, you can really utilize your space very efficiently. So you don't necessarily need, like the traditional stigma, I guess, that farming has, or gardening has, is you see a tractor and acres and acres and acres of fields growing, crop after
monoculture.
Yeah, and you don't need that. I mean, just like we have acres each of us has, acres and acres, but I mean, my garden's pretty substantial, but yours is also very large, but you pack a lot into your space.
Lot, yes.
Like
the tighter you pack things, the less weeding and the less maintenance, the less space you have to maintain. And it's surprising. You can just keep everything in just a small area, and
you give food away to your neighbors and everything.
I have elderly neighbors and stuff, and I supply a lot of people with food. It gives me great joy.
So you provide people with food yourselves, but what you're doing now is developing purposeful planting.
Yes.
Yeah. So tell me about purposeful planting. What's the overarching idea with that new endeavor?
Well, we want to teach people how to take the knowledge that we've accumulated over our 7 decades of combined experience between the two of us, and it doesn't have to be overly complicated. You don't have to, read thousands of pages on microbiology and soil, and it doesn't have to be overly complicated. Everything that you need is supplied by nature, and when you learn to utilize what you have at your disposal, you don't need chemical fertilizers, you don't need pesticides. I mean, there isn't all that in nature. There wasn't any of that long before we come along, and everything existed quite fine. So it's
funny how that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, and people didn't have all these weird health problems and stuff like they do now, and we're kind of our own worst enemy in that regard. you know, we think that we're advancing so much, but in a lot of ways we've gone backwards. We've lost,
We've
just,
lost touch with the land, for one
yeah,
thing. We've lost touch with the idea of where our food even comes from.
yeah. I mean, some people grow up their entire lives in a city and never have seen the forest outside of a city park. I
Or
mean,
they've never like had the pleasure of picking a raspberry and popping it in their mouths, or pulling a cucumber off of a cucumber vine, and you know, it being early in the morning, and be actually cool, and like it's a pleasure that we have taken for granted. And it was through this realization that we were taking all of this for granted. It was just something that we did because it was pleasurable, and it, you know, saves us tons of money, tons of money,
thousands and thousands of dollars every year.
yeah, but it's also something else about gardening is, especially in these times, perhaps when everybody's more stressed out than they ever have been, and not just for the COVID thing, for life in general. I mean, everybody's
Finances,
so stressed out.
I mean, it's a busy world.
Yes, that the garden is like, for me personally, it is my go-to place. I'm a human service counselor, so some days are really hard what I do, and 20 minutes in the garden just picking potato bugs or plucking weeds, and I'm renewed. Like, yeah. I can just feel myself like emptying out of all of my anxiety, and it's wonderful.
I live on a big hill, so I enjoy the exercise also. My neighbors think I'm a little crazy, I think, because I'll fill up my watering cans, and I've got like 400 feet of hose that I could easily drag down and water everything, but I just fill the cans and I run down the hill and water everything. Then I run back up the hill, and my neighbors are like, "How does he do that?" Like, go for like an hour straight. And it just feels great.
But when you're running downhill with the heavy full bottles, it's a little different than if you had to go up.
He has a pretty steep incline.
Oh, so yeah.
It like, works the legs and thighs.
Yeah. Yeah, it's probably, oh, well, just to give you an idea how steep it is, the front of my house, it looks like it's just a one-story house, and then the back of the house, there's only 4 feet of the foundation it's under, so it's like a story and 3/4. So it's pretty steep. So
yeah, I'm getting the picture.
It's a good workout.
In other words, you really can grow in a variety of locations. Oh, yeah. It doesn't have to be the picture perfect anything.
No, not at all. I've got, we're actually demoing balcony and deck gardening right now at my house, because I've got a really big deck, and as well, for the majority of the people, because our population, you know, is concentrated mainly in cities and suburbia and stuff like that. So most people don't have huge backyards. So we thought, well, we could offer the deck and balcony gardening. We wanted to offer that for free on our Facebook page to our subscribers. So we're actually editing that up, and we're going to release some demos to show people how to get started in the space, in the smallest space that they have available. Because almost everybody has a balcony.
Or porch.
Or porch. Even as long as you're not interfering with it, even a fire escape, if you could step out on your fire escape and put some planter boxes up on the wall around your windowsill. I mean, it's just that space right there. You can grow quite a bit of food in.
You see that in Europe a lot. Window boxes. People grow a myriad of things in their window boxes, and it's I think it's beautiful.
It is, yeah. And you don't even need a lot of sun. I mean, there's certain crops that you can grow even if you're on a shady side of the building, like not necessarily head lettuce, but like your leaf lettuce, radishes, things like that. Yeah. Even peas you can grow with as little as 3 hours of sunlight a day. And I mean, leaf lettuce, like your leafy greens, if you have too much sun, will burn. So on a shady balcony, you can grow all your salads right there. And the more you trim it, as long as you're feeding the soil, the more you trim it, the more it'll grow. So you can literally just have a salad every 2 or 3 days, all season long.
Feed the soil. What does that mean?
Well, your soil will only feed you as much as you feed it. And in order to garden 100% organically, you have to utilize, well, you just take a look at nature. When you think of how the cycle of nature works in the fall, well, you have the spring rains, obviously, and then in the fall, all the leaves fall, and you don't need tillers, and chemical fertilizers, the leaves and everything dies and that decomposes. And then in the spring, you've got a fresh layer of soil right there. So
And mulch. Yes.
and it suppresses weeds. So we basically use that same system in our garden. And it's not something that you really see anywhere. I myself personally haven't seen anybody else do it quite this way. Like we have composters for our kitchen scraps because you don't want raccoons and skunks digging in your garden. But as far as grass clippings, leaves, the perfect mixture of soil is 2 parts leaves to 1 part grass clippings. That's actually the absolute perfect mixture for organic soil. So what we do, I mean, like I said, it's all free and it's a very cost-effective way. In the spring, people rake up their leaves that they missed in the fall, and in the fall, I mean, everywhere you look, there's bags and bags and bags of leaves. We just throw them on our trailer and take them home and spread them in our garden. And I mean, it's like, thanks.
People think I'm crazy. I go around town loading my van like on a regular basis with all of their raked up leaves that they want to get rid of. But
it saves us lots of work. If people want to rake their yards for hours and hours all weekends, like, thanks. You just supplied half the mulch and soil for our garden. So
yeah, you're driving along. Wait, there's some leaves. We have to pull over.
Yeah,
truly.
Exactly. And I mean, it's perfect. If they're wet leaves, they're a perfect base to put down in your walking paths because they'll make a mat and they'll suppress your weeds. And the less weeds you have in your walking paths, that's a whole strip that you don't have to worry about weeding. And the dry leaves, to keep them from blowing, if they're in a bag and they're already dry, you just dump them out and mow them, and it mulches them up, and there you go. They don't blow away then.
And we both have baggers on our mowers as well.
Yeah.
So every bit of grass clippings is utilized as well.
Yeah, because if you put the grass clippings over top of your leaves, the wind won't pick up the leaves and blow them around, so you're not chasing them around. And if there's some blow away, the next time you mow, you get them anyway.
Yeah.
So what that does, it works in a lot of ways. It'll not only suppress the weeds, but it keeps your soil warm, which will probably double the growth of your crops because you're keeping the moisture in the soil. So, and it's also warm because when things decompose, it creates heat. So if you did an example, and we're gonna do little experiments with this just to show people that view our program, we can show an unmulched bed versus a mulched bed, and you'll see a distinct difference. Like you can pull that. Well, right now we haven't had rain in 7 weeks. This is unusual. It was 44 just a couple of days ago.
It's dangerously dry.
It was
dangerously dry. The forests are all closed. There's no campfires, anything. Like it's really dangerous.
We didn't. I think it only rained once in May.
Yeah.
Just at the beginning. So this is really unusual for here. But I mean, people think Canada. This definitely isn't igloos and stuff like that. Like, people say this is the banana belt of Atlantic Canada. I'm not quite sure where they got the banana part from because I haven't seen any bananas growing here. But in the winter it's cold, but in the summer, our area in particular is very warm. Like I said,
we have really 4 very distinct seasons.
Yes, 4 very distinct seasons. It's not a gradual transition. When it's winter, it's -15, -25 Celsius, and sometimes as cold as -30. But when it's summer, it's the exact opposite. It's +30. Like I said, just a couple of days ago, it was 44 Celsius. So I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but it was hot. I mean, it was hotter here than it was in Cuba. So.
Yeah, it was just uncomfortable.
Yeah, it was pretty intense. So I mean, if we didn't have mulch on our garden, it would be like the Sahara Desert with 7 weeks of no rain.
Yeah.
But I mean, I go down once a week with some watering cans and just water around the base of the plants, and it soaks through the mulch. And I mean, in 3 weeks, no rain. I in one of our videos, I said it hadn't rained in 3 weeks, and I pulled the mulch back, and an inch below the soil, it was still damp. So none of the plants were wilting or anything like that. And I showed the bed right beside it. I hadn't planted yet, and I grabbed a handful and crumbled it, and it just blew like dust.
It was powdered.
Just shows that's a pretty good example right there.
And another thing about it, you know that you're doing well with your gardening is if you have lots of earthworms. And I know a lot of people think that worms are yucky and icky, but I'll tell you, they are your best friends. And
oh yeah.
Yes.
And if you like to fish, well.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There's another free food source right there.
Yeah.
But I mean, you compost right in the garden with your leaves and grass clippings, and that feeds the soil. And every year it gets better. Like a lot of people, I see it all the time. People, oh, I'm going to start a garden this year, and they go out and buy 50, bags of super soil, and they spend like, $400 or $500, and they end up taking a tiller to their lawn. Don't do that. That's a big no. And then they till up their their grass, and then they dump $500 worth of soil with fertilizer in it, and then they perfectly manicure these rows, and then you just chopped up sod clumps and fed it with awesome soil, so now you just grew perfectly manicured rows of 6-foot high grass. So and then they get discouraged. Oh, I'm never doing that again, and it was a waste of time, waste of money. But if they would start with the right foundation, that's kind of what our program is based on, is starting with the right foundation. And there's a lot of things that we've learned to avoid a lot of that extra unnecessary hard work.
Because we've done a lot of the extra hard work and made a lot of blunders over the years. And learned from it.
Yeah, me in particular, because I grew, like I said, like you started with the beginning of this interview, I grew up on a farm with my mom, learning from her. But when I bought my own homestead, I was like, well, I'm, and this is a new generation, and
I'm gonna do it my way.
Yeah, I can do it better, and there's new ways, and
it was like a competition. I just sat back and snickered.
Yeah, but I did I should say, accidentally stumble upon some pretty awesome things that worked really well, but I made a lot of blunders trying to go out on my own and veer off of what I was taught somewhat. I made myself a lot of extra work, and that's something, because of what I did, that's one of the things that we want to share with our program. I did exactly what I just talked about. I rented this big hydraulic tiller, like you could till up anything, and I was like, oh, I'm going to till, and I started tilling, and I'm like, oh, I'll put another garden over there. Well, I had 2/3 of an acre tilled up for gardens. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Of course, I did what I just said. I tilled up field and grass, and I had witchgrass where I live. So witchgrass, every little piece of root will grow a new blade of grass. So I tilled it all up, and instead of 10 blades of grass, I turned every square into 100 blades of grass. And oh my God, I made myself a lot of unnecessary work. So I changed it up big time. I drastically shifted back to
smaller.
Well, yeah, smaller. Yeah, I probably cut it back to
smaller, more manageable.
Yeah, I probably cut it back to about half. 1/3 of an acre, maybe now. Yeah, probably half, 1/3 of an acre, and it's still really huge. But yeah, don't do what I did. Don't till up your lawn.
And that's the gold, right? You've already made the errors, the blunders, the try this, try that. You've already done that part. And so now you're bringing that experience to help save people from making the same, having the same learning curve.
Absolutely.
We don't want to discourage. We want to encourage, and it is so pleasurable. Like gardening is pleasurable. I mean, not only can you supply yourself with clean, healthy alternatives, but you can share, which is wonderful. It's a great neighborhood building exercise. I mean, we would like to, when this gets more underway, we would like to actually start a movement of having community gardens, like approach church groups and maybe
the food banks,
and
like the Kiwanis Club and the Lions Club, things like that. Like, groups, basically organizations that
service groups.
Yes. So it would be nice, because there's a lot of people that, like, especially in city centers, that, they don't have access to any place where they can grow. And I mean, if you organize something with a few municipalities and, got food banks involved and service groups involved and maybe a few community churches and things like that, they're all about, those groups are all, camaraderie is a big thing. And that's something we've kind of lost in our society. Like back in the day, neighbors helped neighbors, and I mean, a lot of people don't even know their neighbors now. So it would be a way to kind of bring that back. And in turn help people that don't have the necessary space or the just the ability to be able to do it. I mean, there's city lots and things like that
That are just
that
vacant.
are just vacant. Yeah. I mean, businesses that went out of business, or, you know, just, I mean, empty parking lots that aren't being used because there's no businesses there. I mean, you could move in there if you got permission from a municipality. You could move in there with in collaboration with the food bank and put up some box gardens, and you could have your volunteers to help maintain it. And anybody that didn't have available space to do it themselves would be more than happy to volunteer some of their time. I mean, it doesn't take much time, especially if you have a community of people helping. So everybody puts in 10 minutes a week, you would have a perfectly manicured garden if you had, you know,
Enough people, yes, joining together. And
yeah.
and who knows where that would lead, you know? I mean, people would make friends with people that they don't necessarily have a chance to meet.
And the COVID thing kind of makes that a little bit difficult at the moment, but all things will pass. This will pass eventually. And I think people are going to be really in need of that camaraderie after this much isolation.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that, you know, our gardening has helped us with, is this isolation. We have that stress relief. I mean, we're not sitting inside watching the news, you know, dwelling on, well, the news, everybody knows.
Or binging on Netflix or something. Who has time for that?
Yeah, I don't have time for that.
I don't have time for that. No way.
So, I mean, it's so much more therapeutic, and it's better for your health, for the physical activity, and for the food that you get, just to go outside and enjoy the outdoors. You don't, I mean, we're not getting much enjoyment there's nothing we haven't seen on TV that's much different. I mean, it might be a new episode, but all in all, it's just slight alterations of the same thing we've seen for the last 10 years of our lives, right?
Yeah, truly.
How many times have they remade Batman?
I don't even know.
So
let's go back to a couple of things you said. One thing is you are growing organically. And another thing you said was to put fertilizer on the garden. Sometimes people might think that fertilizer is not organic. And of course, I mean, I grew up on a farm. I grew up in Winnie the Pooh's 100-acre wood. I had that pleasure of getting the fresh raspberry and blackberry off the bush and the trees. And the chicken product.
Yeah,
I have chickens. Yes.
Yeah, we had chickens and ducks and stuff. Yeah.
So if I'm in a small apartment in the middle of town where there's a food desert and there's no fresh food available, so I'm one of your customers and I want to start growing, probably not going to get chicken product to put on my balcony boxes or my indoor tomato plant. So what does fertilizer mean in that case? And then we'll go back to the organic.
Well, anybody can make compost. We both have like a pail, like our compost pail that we keep under our kitchen sink.
It's sealed. It's
sealed. Yes, always keep it sealed. But eggshells, paper towels, potato peelings, anything that comes from nature. And I know paper towels.
Coffee filters and grinds too.
Everything literally goes in apple cores, banana peels.
Just not meat. Don't put meat, because
meat.
It slows down the decomposition process. You can use bones to a certain extent if they're ground up.
But who's
going to grind up their bones? I mean, and I've seen people use lobster shells in the garden, and I tried it in one flower bed once, and that was 5 years ago, I think, and I still have lobster claws in my flower bed, so they don't break down.
Yeah. Or we have seashells. It's the same thing. I mean, maybe minute amounts of
little flakes come off,
leach out, but it's
eggshells.
Yeah,
way to go, eggshells. Yeah.
But I mean, you can just make your own compost, and like we work that. You can work that right into your soil. If you say you were like you said on a porch or a balcony. You put down, you have a big pot, obviously. Another thing,
5-gallon pots.
Don't try to grow things in little tiny pots. And a lot of people make this mistake. They try to grow in little like
gallon pots.
And you get a little breeze, and whatever you're growing is gonna.
Yeah.
This is too small, right?
Yeah,
Way too small.
even
Exactly.
the tall and narrow, like the narrow base one. I mean, it might be stable at first, but when you got a tomato plant that's 4 times as tall as a good container,
Yeah, it's going to blow over. It's
You
going to
break your
break,
plants.
and you're going to be devastated. So, yes, we've gardened in old dresser drawers.
Yeah, they'll last a couple
Gyprock
seasons.
pails. That's another thing. Get your kids to paint the gyprock pails.
Yeah, just because it's a recycled pail doesn't mean it can't be
It
decked
has
out
to have
look
holes
nice.
drilled in the bottom and stuff. Like, I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily cost a bunch of money. Good thing. Okay, I'm going to use the example of a gyprock pail. It's about that high, about what, 3.5 gallons.
Yeah, 3.5 gallons.
You put some leaves and grass clippings in the bottom after you drill about 6 holes, like good size, like dime size holes.
Half-inch holes.
And then put some soil, put a compost pot full of your clippings and potato peelings and everything. Have a layer of that. And buy bagged soil. You can buy bags of compost, and you've got yourself right off the bat. And as the roots of the plants go down, they're going to access those nutrients, break them down, and
you've got composting underneath your soil all season long. So you don't need to add the chemical fertilizer because it's feeding itself the whole season long. So
you're emulating nature by doing that.
Yeah, and we actually have one of our videos that we just finished editing. Actually, that we're going to be posting is all about that. That's part of the deck and balcony gardening thing, and that's what we do. We have 5-gallon pots, and you basically fill it to the top with leaves, and then you squish it down because it looks fluffy, and by the time you squish it down, it's only about 3 inches deep. And then we put just a perfect example for me, my daughters have a pet bunny, and anybody who's ever had a pet bunny, they're a fertilizing machine. So I mean, if you had a little cute little pet bunny, that would be all the fertilizer a household needs.
It poops.
It poops a lot.
Yeah. Guinea pig too, I was reading.
Yes. There you go.
Well,
Perfect.
there you go. Perfect example. Because any animals that don't eat meat, use, because you don't want to use dog or anything like that manure because they carry parasites and things like that, and we don't want to get into that. But if you had like guinea pigs, like you just said, anything like that, even a pet store,
hamsters, anything.
Yeah, if you went to a pet store, I mean, or even like there's horse farms and things like that, like stables, they have to pay to have their manure hauled away. So they're not going to say no to somebody saying, "Hey, can I shovel some of your manure?" And they'd be like, "Yeah, no problem."
Or a zoo, a petting zoo, anything like that. Like it's free for the taking. I'm sure.
Just like the leaf thing that we go around picking up bags of leaves. I mean, if you have 5-gallon, if you don't have access to anything other than organic sources, just leaves and grass clippings, I mean, just fill a pail, like we said, with leaves, squish it down, put some compost from your kitchen in there, and fill it up with some good quality bagged soil, and there you go. You're good to go.
And each year you can reuse that same soil, but mix it and amend it, like add organic matter to it, and it'll just get better and better and better until it's like black gold.
So every year that you garden it gets better and better and better, and that's one of the things that we try and encourage people to get involved in gardening, to not get discouraged. If your first year isn't the best, don't get discouraged. Keep at it. Like my first year, I mean, if somebody wanted tomatoes, my God, I literally had, I built a trailer with a half-ton box as the trailer box, and I had it level full, a truck bed full of tomatoes level. I mean, it's probably, it was over 1,000 pounds of tomatoes easily. I mean, it was quite a haul pulling that up the hill with my truck. It's like, whoa, that's a lot of tomatoes. We actually gave tomatoes to
anybody that wanted
some. We gave a bunch to Granite Town Farms in St. George. I mean, there was a bunch of places we gave tomatoes to. I was bringing in 4 and 5, grocery bags of them to work every day. And I ate tomato sandwiches for like 3 months.
They loved you.
It was excessive.
It was a lot of tomatoes, but it was really good. I mean, and anybody who's ever picks fresh tomatoes and grows some fresh basil. You make a tomato sandwich with some fresh basil and fresh tomatoes and stuff. It's awesome. Yeah, you can't get that at the store. So
Yeah, no, you cannot. Not
no.
quite that fresh. So let's go back to the organic part. You've talked about the good soil, the good clippings, the good everything for organic. Why is it important to go organic? I mean, I have my own answers, but we're probably, I mean, I'm sure we're in alignment, obviously, because we're here. But for someone who thinks that GMO is good or it's going to feed the world, I say, no, that's not really the reality. That's absolutely the opposite of reality. But why is it important to have non-GMO, good organic process?
I had a personal reason when I was, let me see, when I was 21 years old, I found out that I had cancer. I suddenly became really health oriented. And I had grown up on a farm where we spread phosphate and we spread quicklime. Phosphate is like chemical fertilizers and stuff like that. And my parents used to use like potato dust, which was like chemical and everything.
Dust.
Yes. And I guess I rethought everything because I had like a 1-year-old baby, and I suddenly realized that I was a mere mortal, and it totally reset the way I thought about eating, because what you eat is how you are. And that was the beginning, truly the beginning of my quest for organics. And I became pretty passionate about it.
And how did you make the association between you've developed cancer from all of the chemicals that were put on with all the love in the world?
I don't know
right?
if I did or not, but I just, I was hedging my bets. I truly was. I was hedging my bets. I mean, why would somebody so young and really healthy, because I was always like a real athlete and everything, would suddenly have a problem like that? So it jump started a whole new way of thinking for me, and I've never turned back.
I think often things in life that may seem negative on the surface actually have the positive flip side of the coin. Absolutely. to help you to pivot and course correct.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I mean, like, spiritually and stuff, we're told, what you consume, whether it's emotional or mental or anything. I mean, so why would it not carry on to nutritional as well? So
yeah, got to start with the right foundation.
Yeah,
can't build a house on a rickety foundation, so you gotta keep that strong base.
Yeah.
And growing organically also, you're protecting the soil. Most people don't realize when you commercially farm and you use all these chemical fertilizers, it might be good in the short term, in the immediate. Yes, you're able to turn any average space into a food production machine. But after a few years, especially in the long term, a few decades, what chemical fertilizers do, yes, they do feed your plants in the immediate, but they speed up the decomposition process so fast that it actually makes your soil barren. It totally disrupts the natural balance. Everything is sped up so much to the point where the decomposition and the microbiology is eating every food source that they have so quickly that they literally starve the soil to the point where it can't support any life anymore. So all these huge commercial farms that we're all relying on for food sources, it's a ticking clock. There's only so much space that we have. All the other space is being populated with towns and cities and our big commercial grocery stores. So what's going to happen when all these big commercial farms we've been relying on for the last 50, 60 years, what happens when all those fields are barren and you can't produce food on them anymore? You can't just up and move a city there and then move the fields to where the city was.
Yeah, we've paved and developed, like, for
everything.
People to have park their belongings and pavement and houses on some of the most fertile soils that
Yeah.
our planet has.
Our
which
green
is,
space is limited now.
yeah, which is really unfortunate. And you're seeing like the commercial farms and stuff trying to go back to like green manures where they plant and
Cover
plow,
crops and
cover
stuff,
crop
yeah.
and plow under, just because they need organic matter in the soil. But there again, it costs money to leave a field barren that a farmer is counting on to bear food. So it is
double the land space for the same.
Yes, it's a
same
double-edged
crop.
sword. It truly is.
Yeah. And
Well,
we, sorry, go ahead.
Right now with COVID, we are having a pause. We're having a reset, and we're noticing that the planet is actually regenerating and cleaning up in the environment faster than I think most people thought was even possible.
Oh,
So
yeah.
when it comes to the soil, do you have any sense of how soon we are to that doomsday point of no return? And on the flip side of that question, how quickly do you think soil can be recovered?
It can be recovered, but that's kind of leads us back to the double-edged sword. We only have so much land base that we have for agricultural use, and our population is growing constantly. And what we're not seeing it so much here because we're like a first world nations, but in poor countries, you're seeing it. Like if you do a little bit of research on what's going on right now, especially because of the COVID situation, like a lot of the food supplies are really being crunched big time in third world countries, and people are going hungry. And it's really sad because, I mean, we just don't have the manpower to grow and produce our own food right now. And what's happening, because where we live, we have the luxury of having that big food store. We have a certain amount of stockpile ahead of us. But when you have that gap in your food production, you're eating those food stores. And if you don't have that food stores, well, you can't just replenish that. You have a certain amount of time it takes to grow those crops. And because of the luxury of where we live, we aren't experiencing that gap in the food supply at the level that other places in the world are. And it's sad. I mean, but it kind of brings us back to what we were talking about earlier. If this happened 50, 60 years ago, more people would have been growing their own food, and that wouldn't have been as big of an issue to our food supply. I mean, there weren't even grocery stores until the mid 1940s.
Yeah, after the Second World War.
Yeah, so
like big grocery stores.
Yeah,
like
I mean, there was little
corner stores,
farmers
and that type
markets
of thing,
and
but
things like that.
yeah, not big
No
grocery
supermarkets.
chains. Yeah.
I mean, everybody grew their own small garden, and they had their local farmers that they went to buy their 150 pounds of potatoes and their, get their jugs of milk and stuff like that. And, I guess we've become so dependent that, we can just go down to the superstore or to Walmart or whatever and get our food.
In a carton.
Yeah,
And
packaging.
and it's something that I feel like, I don't think it's going backwards, but most people would think it's going backwards. But I really think because we've gotten away from that, producing our own food, I think that was going backwards, because we got to the point where we're no longer independent, we're completely dependent. And that's one of the big reasons why we think sharing our program right now is really important. We want people, even if they don't learn from us, it doesn't matter. If anybody can take some steps in control of this in their own hands, and it doesn't have to be huge steps, just one little step in the right direction of playing your role in sustaining the environment or supplementing your own nutritional needs organically, just getting in touch with nature, trying not to pollute so much, just any little step at all. If everybody took a small step, it would go a huge way. Like, you would see, well, just look what's happening right now, like what you just said, with everybody in quarantine right now because of COVID. I mean, that's how quickly things can change as far as the environment. And if everybody played their own small role, no matter how small, you would probably see this sustained, and it would only continue to regenerate over time.
I'm hoping that it will
Yeah, I hope so
change
too.
people's mindset.
Because if everybody produced,
As you said earlier, sometimes it takes negativity
Yeah.
to bring about change and a realization.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I'm truly hoping that something positive might come out of this
this might be looked back on as the catalyst that
to change.
that launched people back to providing some of their own food. I mean, even if you only supplement 10% of your own food supply, that's 10% that there's not commercial tractors running and, you know, huge equipment, you know, well, you see it, you drive by any great big diesel piece of equipment, it's blowing black smoke out nonstop. And I mean, they're spraying chemical pesticides and stuff everywhere. I mean, that does a lot of damage. I mean, we only have so much land. We only have so much water. The more you mess with that, I mean, it's going to cause a lot of long-term problems. And we're kind of at that tipping point in a lot of ways. So now I think this could actually be a good thing in the long run, because it could make people not only sit back and see how quickly it can regenerate, it gives people hope that it isn't too late, because I think a lot of people thought it was too late, and they're like, well, there's no point in trying to stop now because we're already past that point.
Being pessimistic about the whole thing. Yes.
Yeah, so I think this was kind of an eye-opener, even for scientists and things like that, because they didn't realize that maybe we're not past that tipping point. And I really think that we're not. We're probably a lot closer still, but like I said, if everybody played their part, I think we'd see a dramatic change in our environment. We can stop, you know, the environmental damage with the right collaborative mindset.
Something that we see, because we don't use chemicals, and like I have butterflies like everywhere. Birds, like people are saying that they don't see birds the way they used to, like even 5-6 years ago, let alone 10-15. We've got lots of birds.
Think of the fireflies when I was a kid. You could go around and fill an entire jar of fireflies in 5 minutes and light your whole tent up. You'd be running around for 3 days and you wouldn't even have 10 in a jar.
We're trying to bring all of that back.
Yeah.
And the idea of catching butterflies and what is a butterfly net, I think people now have no concept, because I could do that growing up, literally catch a butterfly and then release, you don't do anything.
But you see, we need our butterflies and our moths and our birds, and there's all kinds of insects and things that pollinate, and our bees, what is it, 70% of the food that we consume depends on pollinators.
On bees especially.
On bees, specifically bees. And our bees are being attacked by all kinds of like respiratory mites and like other bee species that have been invasive species.
That because we've
toyed with
nature and created our own species of bee, and
the better
bee that ended up being more susceptible to diseases and was really invasive and wiped out a lot of our indigenous species. And we see that with a lot of GMOs, like you were talking about. The problem that I see with GMOs, yes, they might produce a lot of food, just like the fertilizers in the short term, but most of them are sterile. You might have a seed that you can grow in that initial season, but they're sterile. They will not produce seeds that you can plant again. For the most part, GMOs are like that. So you might have a nice seedless watermelon, but if something happened and you couldn't get seeds for your following season, how do you get a seedless watermelon ever again? So you got to have the seeds. So
another thing that's affecting our health is an overuse of antibiotics. And glyphosate, for example, is actually an antibiotic. And we're consuming that in large numbers. So I'm all about finding these ways for people to be sustainable in their food sources and bringing food to people in their homes. Now, I have tried personally, I'll buy a good, fresh, organic basil plant from the grocery store, and it's in water, and it says, do this. Every single time I kill it. How do I not kill my basil plant? That is what I would like to know.
Don't overwater it.
Don't overwater it. Yeah.
So often people overwater. Overwatering can kill it just as fast as underwatering it.
Yeah.
These are ones that are hydroponically grown, so the whole thing is water, and it says keep water at this level. I kill it.
Well, the hydroponic thing, I don't have a whole lot of experience with that myself personally, but just because mainly with hydroponics, you need to add usually chemical fertilizers. You can do aquaponics, and there is a business locally that does aquaponics, but once again, you need a pretty significant amount of space, and you need a pretty complicated setup to, do aquaponics. So getting right down to the basics, sticking it in the dirt and feeding the soil is the best all around way to go.
Next time I'm going to ignore their directions and stick it in the dirt.
Yeah.
I'll let you know how that goes. But when it comes to herbs in general, do you have a line perhaps, or maybe if it's not, maybe it's a good one to start, about having growing herbs in your own home? Because that is something that's so expensive in the grocery store.
It is, yes. A lot of the herbs I grow are right on my deck, actually. I grow thyme and rosemary. You grow rosemary in your garden. You get thyme and rosemary in your greenhouse.
We have chives. We have, oh my goodness.
Leeks.
Leeks, parsley, cilantro.
Green onion. I must have about 300 basil plants in my garden. I've got probably 100 each of Genovese basil, sweet basil, and mammoth basil. The mammoth I use for my burgers and tomato sandwiches, cucumber sandwiches. I mean, fresh basil on any kind of a sandwich is amazing. Like lettuce is awesome, but that's like on the back burner when basil's in season. It's like, the basil, I'll take the basil.
And it's wonderful just to walk through the garden and brush against it, and then your whole yard smells of it.
Yeah.
And mints or anything, like we make mint teas and stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole variety of and we make kombucha, so that's another thing that we flavor with some of these herbs.
Yeah, throw some mint in your kombucha, and kombucha is something that can help a lot of people the natural way to help their own stomach health. And I used to make kefir. You can buy kefir, I guess is how it's pronounced, at the store. It's like a dairy product because I have I'm not lactose intolerant, but I have a milk sensitivity. So, and that sucks because everything that is awesome is dairy. Like, I want to eat that, but I can't. Like, I love cheesecake. So it was like, my wife makes the best cheesecake like I've ever had. So when I see these awesome cheesecakes, it's like, I don't care. I'm eating that. So I looked for a way that I could combat having a dairy sensitivity without any kind of medications or anything like that. And a friend of mine they're actually herbalists, and they recommended kefir because she had digestive problems, and that was one of her cure-alls. And I was like, oh, I'll give it a try. Actually, it was by accident that I discovered it worked for me because I was at their house and they offered me a glass of kefir, and I'm like, I haven't had a glass of milk in like 3 years because like I eliminated things from my diet, and lo and behold, it was dairy that was causing the problem. So they handed me this glass of kefir, and I'm like, oh, well, I was a guest at their house, so I'm like, oh, thank you. And I'm like, I drank it, and I'm like, oh, this is going to cause me some stomach pain. I'm going to have some heartburn here in a bit. But to my surprise, nothing. And that's what got me into, the kombucha and the probiotic foods, because I had heartburn every day. And it ended up being like my diet was awesome. It was just, I clearly had a imbalance of the right, flora, I guess, because your stomach is your foundation, right? So I started making kombucha and drinking kefir. My milk sensitivity went away. As long as I had a glass of kefir every day, I could eat anything dairy. I could drink chocolate milk, eat yogurt, tons of cheese. It was like I was eating everything dairy that I could. I was like, oh my God, this is great. I could sit down and eat like an entire cheesecake, It was great.
You had your pass.
Yeah. I mean, that was like the miracle cure. So anybody listening to this that has any kind of dairy sensitivity, give kefir a try. It will probably cure it for you. And kombucha was awesome too. I mean, kombucha helps you digest your food. You should only have about a cup and a half a day because it's acidic.
Even though it tastes great.
Even though it tastes awesome, but it helps you digest your food. I mean, if you eat a heavy meal, like if there's something that's quite heavy, you drink a glass of kombucha and it'll help you digest it, no problem. And,
But fermentation is a process that we can use intentionally, whether it's kefir, or whether it's fermented soy, fermented cabbage, anything.
Sauerkraut, yes,
Yeah.
anything like that, yeah.
And yet, as you say, not too much, because again, it's that delicate balance in our gut flora. There's a lot coming out now about the gut flora. And there's also information that's showing how glyphosate makes that out of balance and can lead to a lot of health problems. So anything else?
A lot of the chemicals that are, pardon, you just cut out for a second there.
Oh, I was going to say anything else about how about the health benefits of this type of gardening, along with the probiotic kombucha and fermentation. Any other ideas on that?
Well, basically, the more you feed your soil, the more nutritious your food is going to be. Commercially grown food is actually less nutritious. If you read up on some of these studies, like I was saying before about barren soil because of all these chemical fertilizers, it's rushed in the growing process so much that it actually completely changes the nutritional value of the food that is grown. And even organic, even a lot of the foods that you buy at stores that are labeled as organic, they're disinfected to the point where you're not getting what you normally would get if it actually, I don't consider a lot of what's labeled as organic because I don't soak my carrots in bleach and things like that before I eat them. So
they do that with organic carrots and call it organic?
Well, there's a lot of organic vegetables that are, they're washed in disinfectants and things like that because heaven forbid somebody might get a germ. I mean, yeah, don't pick your carrots out of a manure pile and then eat it, but I mean,
but yeah,
soap and water goes a long way.
They do it for spoilage too and shipping and everything. Like, I mean,
yeah, like
there's a time delay and
if they try, they have to. What they do for spoilage purposes, they basically eliminate every chance of any microbiology on the food to even exist, so that it won't spoil. And to me, that takes away from the organic part of it. So people are kind of fooled by that organic label that they see. They're basically, yes, it's grown close to organic, but all the benefits that you're getting from the organic growing process, a lot of it's eliminated when they disinfect or pasteurize or whatever you want to call it. I mean, back in the day, milk wasn't radiated before you drank it. I mean, it wasn't.
Yeah.
And when you see a carton of milk that's on the shelf and it's got a 6-month shelf life, non-refrigerated, that's
not.
No, you like fresh milk. I mean, within a couple of days, you want to start making cheese with it or butter because it's not, it's not fresh anymore. So it's, you notice that big time. I mean, in a lot of the foods you see, like you read the label and it's like, well, you can't even pronounce half the stuff that's on the label, and those are all things to stop the fermentation process and to keep things
fresh,
what they consider fresh, and it's not good for you.
Yeah, it looks good and it's got a pretty package, but you put it in your body, and whatever they have done to the food, you're now doing that to your body if you make that food choice. But a lot of people don't realize that that's the food that they've got, that it's not helping their body. And
that's something else as well. Like when you garden for yourself,
you know what you're getting.
A tomato doesn't have to look perfectly cylindrical, or it doesn't have to be
the perfect table presentation.
Like it'll taste, what you grow might not look so great, but by gosh, it's going to taste 10 times better.
Yeah.
And I just, it boggles the mind to think of the wonderful nutrition that's actually thrown away just simply because, whoops, just simply because things don't look right.
I'm good. You're
Okay.
good.
We just got a red light come on there,
That
but
said our internet was.
yeah, I mean, a spot on your apple, not a big deal to me, but I mean, at the store, that would be applesauce. I mean, you get a gigantic tomato, they're going to grind that up and put it in a can instead of selling it at the store. I mean, it's just like double yolk or eggs. Like most of our chickens lay, gigantic eggs, and they have 2 yolks in them, and they don't usually sell those at the store because they're
It's out of the ordinary.
out of the ordinary. So,
I love it when I get a carton of eggs that have 2 or 3 doubles in them. It's like, great.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, a double dipper.
Double dipper. That's what I called them when I was a kid. Yeah, yeah. And duck eggs are awesome too. I know most people have never even tried a duck egg, but duck eggs are fantastic.
You bake with duck eggs, and everything is just so like puffy and rises so beautifully.
Oh yeah, like you make cookies with duck eggs, and they're nice and gooey and moist, and like cakes will have twice as much lift, and it's like a baker's dream. If you like baking, you get a hold of some duck eggs, and you'll be blown away by the difference. They're pretty rich. They're awesome. Yeah. I wouldn't eat them if you got really high cholesterol on a regular basis, but they're good.
They're good.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you can have your own ducks in a city block, though.
Anywhere where you're allowed chickens, you should be allowed ducks. Is like within the same number restrictions, of course. But ducks are actually, I had ducks and chickens, and I found the ducks actually much easier to take care of. I got Indian runner ducks, which are more of a land duck than a water duck, and
they're upright ducks.
They stand like almost perfectly vertical, and they eat a lot in the winter. But if you're in the southern United States where you don't really have much of a winter, you're not going to worry about that hardly at all. In the spring, summer, and fall, they forage for 75% of their food supply. Whereas chickens, I find chickens, you have to keep them contained. Because you can free range them, but if you have flower beds or a garden or anything like that, they scratch.
I'll get
use of them.
They will destroy your perfectly manicured garden and flower beds looking for bugs. And ducks don't do that. They just poke holes, and it aerates your soil. And they're the ultimate pest control. Chickens won't eat slugs. Ducks, it's their favorite food. So if you're in a damp, wet area that has lots of slugs around your garden, you get a couple ducks and you won't see a slug or a snail ever again. So,
well, that's a good gardening tip right there. If you're in the
we're going to try a few. We're going to try a few things and share with our
subscribers. Yeah, because you can use ducks in the garden, but don't be fooled by what you read on the internet that says, "Oh, just let them in your garden." Don't do that.
No. They will sample.
Yeah, as soon as they get curious, because ducks eat a lot, and they'll get curious, and you'll go out and all your lettuce and all your leafy greens will be completely gone. But I mean, nothing will eat potato bugs, but ducks will. So if you have potatoes, and potato bugs are the biggest chore for potatoes, just herd your ducks in. They'll clean the potato bugs off and then herd them back out before they get curious. And there you go. They do all the picking for you. Do that every couple of days, and you're saving yourself a lot of work. So while you herd them in and do your watering and things, and then herd them out, and it's just part of your routine.
Yes. Yeah.
And it
sounds
easy to herd. So
sounds to me like you guys have a lot of very interesting and unique tips to bring to your information for people. So let's talk about purposeful planting just a little bit more.
Okay.
Because we're wrapping up close to the end of the hour here, and I want to make sure people know how to find you a little bit more. Do you have a program coming out right away? Do you have how can they reach you, and a little more about your program?
Okay, well, they can look us up on Facebook, and we have a website, purposefulplanting.ca, and they can sign up right on there. We have a mailing list, but that's mainly just to send out emails just to show upcoming courses that we're offering. Most of the information that they're going to be seeing is going to be on our Facebook page. And if they choose to subscribe with us, they'll have access to weekly videos. We'll have, I mean, 1 week you might only get one video, and the next you might have 4 or 5. It just, as we go throughout the growing season, it follows us throughout the whole season. So, and we don't just do the same thing every season. We have our routine that we do, and we've got a system that will work every single time. But we like to experiment and try new things as well. So we document all that, and that's part of the program as well. So part of the program is going to be people having the opportunity to learn with us as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
every year we try new crops,
Yeah.
new vegetables, new fruits.
New species of certain types. Like there's a million types of peas and beans
Yeah.
and corn, and we try different strains of each.
We keep diaries like every year so that we don't sort of forget, because you do forget.
Yeah.
And so that we don't, get something that we didn't like again
Yeah.
a second time.
Yeah, I grew some corn 2 seasons ago.
Yeah.
And it was very productive, but it was like cattle corn.
It
Ugh.
was horrible.
It was not sweet. It was like really starchy, really chewy. It was like chewing on like dehydrated popcorn almost.
It was bad.
Yeah, cattle corn is not as good as good fresh sweet corn.
No.
Yeah, like the sweet corn is awesome. We got
but we went with we tried some new open pollinated varieties, and
some of them
were great, and
Yeah.
some of them were not so great. So
Yeah.
this is the type of thing that we would like to share with people, is
so they don't have to go through all that.
Yeah, because it's a whole season pretty much. I mean, it's not wasted because our chickens ate it, but it's not wasted, but it's a whole season that
You labored and
you've labored, yes, to produce something that you ended up really not liking. So
yeah. So I mean, if you've got 20 different choices of bush bean to grow, and you've got 3 that are by far the most productive and the best tasting, they're not woody and they're tender, and then why grow the other 17 when you got these 3 that are fantastic
tried and true.
they're
Yes.
tried and true, they're disease resistant, they're highly productive. Just it's all around. It's good to have that journal. And another thing that is very important that I kind of stumbled upon by accident and through some of my problems along the way trying to go out on my own, was creating a gardening calendar. That is a big step in the right direction for anybody that wants to garden. Each crop has a certain time frame that is going to take for it to produce and get to table readiness. So you want to label in your calendar, say if something takes 55 days, you want to put in the calendar, I planted on this date. And then once you see it sprout, okay, it sprouted on this date. So it takes 55 days from the day it sprouted to being table ready. Because some things have a very short window where they're still edible, that they'll go past that and go to seed if they're a non-GMO. So you want, and also so you don't end up with having to pick, like, okay, this week I've got to pick my corn and my potatoes and my peas and my beans and
and you're
100 pounds of carrots. And
yes.
And you take a week's vacation to put in 15 hours a day harvesting food. Like, you want to spread it all out. And if you keep track of all this in a calendar, you can take advantage of successive plantings. Like if we have a short season, so we like to take advantage of short season crops. And anybody that lives in any area can do this. But I mean, generally the longer growing things they're better for winter storage, like squash and things like that. They'll store longer because they're denser basically. But there's a lot of things that will grow very quickly that you can't store over long periods of time, but you can plant every 3 or 4 weeks, and then you'll have successive harvests all season long.
Yeah, and you have to be prepared to
harvest at the right time.
and either freeze or can or bottle or dehydrate or something. So that's something else that we'll share with subscribers as well.
There's a lot of different courses that we're going to be offering. I mean, most people, they may just want to dabble in the gardening at first and get that under their belt. But if they really enjoy it, if they're willing to put in those first couple of years to build their soil, because every year that you garden and you keep feeding that soil, it's going to get less weeds, better quality soil because you're constantly feeding it. I mean, your first year, you might have a pretty successful year, but your next year is going to be better, and your next year is going to be better. About the third year mark, you're going to see a dramatic improvement. And then from that point on, it's just going to be, you're going to be amazed.
You're going to
at the
have
results.
bounty.
Bounty, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, my mom nicknamed me the Kale King because I had like kale. I mean, the leaves were like that wide. They were like 12-inch wide leaves.
Beautiful.
Oh, it was unreal. Yeah, it was Siberian kale that we grew, and I bet you it was 3.5 feet tall anyway, and it was at least 3.5
Adam and
feet
Eve
tall.
could have used it to clothe themselves.
Oh yeah, it was huge. I mean, you took one leaf and you could do up a whole salad with one. It was like a giant fan. It was huge. So.
Well, you sound very good at what you do. You certainly have a lot of joy around doing it, and your mission.
It's a great family activity.
Yeah. I take my kids out in the garden, and there's some pictures on our Facebook page of my kids picking some eggs at my mom's, and I mean, it's a good thing to introduce children to at a young age, because it's something that they'll look back on when they're older, and they'll really appreciate those memories. I mean, like you just said earlier in the interview, you grew up on a farm, like just being around that and being able to eat fresh food yourself. I mean, you had the raspberries and stuff, just like what we were talking about. And it's really nice. It's something that when you're a little kid, it's just a novelty, but when you look back, you're really glad that you had that experience. You realized
it was a gift.
Yeah, it wasn't just a novelty. It was truly
a gift.
A gift, yeah.
It was,
yeah.
And at that time, my grandmother raised 6 children on her own garden and her own canning and her own cutting and cooking and cleaning. I mean, all of those things. And people nowadays have too much to do to really do all of those steps for a large, big garden. But do they? Is there a way to simplify that process? And maybe that's another interview all by itself.
Absolutely, yes. Oh yeah, like
I live mortgage free.
Yeah.
I'm a single mom and I'm mortgage free. I couldn't have done it without my garden.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
And my wife and I, we have 3 children. I mean, we saved up enough money to build our welding business out of pocket just with cutting our grocery bill. I mean, it took a few years, but I mean, most people would have to take a huge loan for that. And
I think a lot of people would be really quite astounded as to how much you can save by growing your own food.
Oh yeah. I mean, condiments, that's about it. I mean, we make our own ketchup. So there's really not a whole lot.
And that's a family affair as well.
Yeah.
You get the kids to run the grinder, and we still do a lot of stuff manually. Like we really do, because it's, I mean, heck, my kids have, my first bunch of kids and then my second bunch of kids, I mean, they've fought over who's going to run the grinder. So there you go. Make use
I
of
want
it.
the word.
Yeah. And I mean, the low impact exercise alone is something that a lot of people could benefit from. I mean, you don't have to, I mean, I like going to the gym and stuff like that, but you don't need to. I mean, you don't need to do that. If you have a garden, I mean, grab a hold of a broad fork, ditch the tiller. You don't need a tiller. I don't use a tiller at all. I grab a broad fork because a tiller, it'll fluff up the top 6 inches, but you're actually compacting what's underneath more and more and more every year.
And you're grinding up your earthworms.
You're grinding up your earthworms. And anybody who's used a tiller, where are you walking? Right? You're tilling and then you're packing it right back down right behind the tiller. So you're defeating the entire purpose. And I mean, you grab a broad fork. I don't know if you've seen a broad fork, but I actually made my own. Mine are like Goliath broad forks. I mean, I wouldn't recommend necessarily starting with the giant ones that I make.
Too Goliath for me.
They're pretty Goliath, but I mean, they're probably 2.5 feet across. So I mean, you stab that in, you're fluffing up an entire bed, as you go. So you're not killing your earthworms, and you're not disturbing the soil to the point where you're messing up your microbiology in the soil. You're just breaking it up enough so that you can plant, and your seeds have easy access to break through the soil.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of benefits that you can do it, organically and by hand. I mean, you don't need a big commercial tractor. You don't need like rows, traditional rows, huge waste of space.
Mhm.
There's a lot of things that people could learn from the way we do it. Just because the way we do it is completely non-traditional, it doesn't mean it's the wrong way. I mean, I've never seen a commercial farm produce what we can produce in the amount of space that we do it in. I mean,
Right.
they have acres and acres and acres and acres
Of one thing,
of one thing.
monoculture, yes.
Yeah, and I mean,
It's a pest magnet. Everything that eats that one product will descend
on that.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, you guys certainly exude joy for what you do. And I look forward to watching you grow as people go grow with you for your purposeful planting. And they can find you on the Facebook group and purposefulplanting.ca. It's been a pleasure to have you here and interview you and learn a little bit about the ins and outs of your planting and your tips and kombucha and earthworms and no filling and do it yourself and no need to go to the gym. There we
No.
go.
Well, I got all kinds more information for people if they're interested. And I mean, if you want to have another interview sometime, we would love to have the opportunity to talk with you. This was great.
Absolutely.
It's been a
We'll do it
pleasure.
again. We'll do it again. So thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
We'll
you.
see you next time. My name is Victoria Bard, founder of createYES, and this is Layla and Logan Binney of Purposeful Planting. Thank you. We'll see you next time.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.